In light of the tragedy that has recently taken place and the loss of one of the most notable people in the entire conservative movement around the world, Charlie Kirk's assassination, I felt compelled to bring somebody that I have profound respect for, who I thought might be able to give us a deeper insight or understanding of the pathologies that are driving these types of actions. So I reached out to have him on the show again. Mr. EM Burlingame, welcome to the David Rutherford Show, sir.
Sorry, it's under these conditions, Dave.
Yeah, me too. If anybody is, if you're listening, what I highly recommend is you go follow EM, get on his mailing list. He's been writing just some incredible articles, including this morning he put out a real powerful reflection on Charlie's death. And would you just talk a little bit about what you put out in terms of the required and continued influence on young American men?
Yeah. This was no accident. This was highly thought out. And I don't mean the action itself, but Charlie, taking out Charlie. In order to bring about whatever resentful ideological faction comes to dominate, it doesn't matter. In order for them to dominate and win the United States and thereby, have a weapon against the rest of the world again, still, they have to take the only real asset and high ground, and that's our young men. Because there are no other assets. Nothing has any value without young men who are willing to stand and fight for it. Period. The land doesn't have value, the assets of the land, no banks, no built up, all this stuff, down underneath is dependent on young men, and men our age still, right? Mm-hmm. who have to lead. But it's dependent on men who are tied to the land, tied to the people, tied to the assets and civilization, society, who will stand and fight for it. Without that, nothing has any value. So
I agree wholeheartedly. And this is something that when Jordy and I first started and launched the show, our main target audience, what we wanted was those young men, right? Because, our generation, we went and we fought, our war in the GWAT, and you could say a lot of us are kind of, sitting in preparation for what we know is coming. But these young people have, so many aspects of their, what their belief system is built around has been, part of this to manipulation to try and really get them to stop believing in the fact that they are the asset. They are what makes the land valuable.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about some of how you interpret what attacks have taken place against them over the last 20 years? And then, kind of lead into how Charlie Kirk and taking him out is so pivotal as a result of what has emerged from his influence, Sean Ryan's Christian influence, and other GWAT or other people that are really professing this new. It's not new. I maybe you could help me understand the best way to describe what it is.
So there's a cycle. There's a pattern, right? And we're watching this pattern play out in Ukraine right now at the death of almost 2 million Ukrainian young men in 3 years, as opposed to about 150,000 Russians, which is still a serious number, larger than all the deaths, American deaths since World War II. Mm-hmm. So not inconsiderable. What do? They demoralize the young men. They impoverish the young men. And this started, I'm 58 years old now. This messaging was already happening in school, toxic masculinity and men were abusers, and all of this stuff was happening in school when I was young, white guilt and male guilt, and all that is already started in the early 70s when I started school. You demoralize the men. You impoverish and demoralize the men. And what does that do? It separates them from loyalty and connection to the land and the peoples of the land and the culture, right, of the peoples of the land. It ensures that they have nothing to live for, nothing to fight for. And then you feed this, what we call Marxist now over the last century and a half, but this isn't a much older, you go after morals and value and honor and duty and beauty and all the things that, motivate young men to build something, be something, to develop themselves. And you attack them all the time. And you find ways to socioeconomically and culturally promote ugliness and insanity and people who don't earn a damn thing but somehow become wealthy. And it's all done on purpose. But at some point, your intent is to, over that time, to convert enough of them to come over to your side and just burn it all down. At some point, that's not because most young men do have thousands, hundreds of thousands, not millions of years of genetic programming in them to defend, to protect their own. And so at some point, that's going to overcome the, recruiting to your malevolent side. And so, at some point, you're going to have to radicalize them with disgust and purity so that they will go out and burn the world to the ground and die in great numbers. This is what happened to the Germans. We did not defeat the Nazis, the National Socialists. We defeated the Germans at the cost of 5 to 7 million of their men, right? So it's the same thing again happening in Ukraine right now. Ukraine is being wiped out because all the men are being killed in this purity, this disgust and purity fight against the Russians. Never mind, it's a civil war because they're the same peoples, right? So the reason they had to kill Charlie Kirk is because they're getting ready, and James Lindsay's talking about this, and I brought it to his attention 5 years ago, actually. Where they have to go now is they've gone as far as they can possibly go with the Marxist degenerate, insanity stuff. And now they're ready to flip the switch to disgust and purity to radicalize our young men, get them ethno-nationalist. It won't start that way first. It'll go after the trans, right, et cetera, and then it'll get ethno-nationalist if it goes that way. Well, the reason they had to kill Charlie Kirk is because Charlie Kirk, no matter what they threw at him, was calm, logical, rational, and called for moderation in thought, in emotion, in action, etc. They had to kill the moderate before they radicalize, and they had to do it publicly. That's one side of it. The second piece of it is that this from our other world, right? It's called confidence targets, right? And so they had to give the radicals, the Marxists, the degenerates, the ones that they want. So what are they going to do now? They're going to switch young men, all these demoralized and impoverished young men, wrathful young men, incel forced, young men, and they're going to drive them into disgust and purity to go kill the trans, the LGBTs, the violent, so they're going to drive them into this place where they do what? They take out the foot soldiers that have been used over the last 40 years. That's right. What you do in a late stage insurgency. You take out your foot soldiers because you don't want them around to continue to be an insurgency against you because they are actually technically insane. Right? The ideologies didn't create the insanity. They were attracted to the ideology that matches their insanity.
Wow. Right?
So that's why they had to take out Charlie Kirk, is because the movement, and you can see it. We can see Nazi stuff, literal Nazi stuff popping up. We're seeing the white pride stuff pop up. There's not all of it's wrong. Some of it's right stuff. Maybe not so much the Nazi stuff, but, loving your own people. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. But you're watching probably $10 billion a month being put into this subtle information campaign. It's what the rape bans are about. It's what the crime, the releasing the criminals is all about. It's about getting the young men into a place where they can trigger disgust And trans is the primary one. We have deep wiring against trans. It's deeply, deeply wired into us, to defend our tribe, our community against the threat, that kind of insanity threat, violent threat. They're now ready to flip the switch, and they had to get rid of Charlie Kirk. And they had to give the courage and confidence to the trans and the criminals and the BLMs and everybody else that you're protected, you're good. It's weapons free.
So they're setting the stage for the battlefield.
Yes.
And the battlefield, as you so articulate, is the battlefield for the mind.
Yes.
And so what I'd like to do now is you wrote this beautiful, beautiful piece yesterday's on September 10th, and which was pretty remarkable timing that you wrote this piece the day that this happened. And it's called The Pathocracy That Owns Us: How Personality Disorders Are Now the Anglo World. And I just want to read one little paragraph from this to introduce the concept, and then hopefully you can expand on it and really take us through step by step on what you're describing, because I really think this will make sense to people in the grander context. Because the last time you came on, we had you talk about the financialists and their kill chain methodology, how they collapse certain cultures or civilizations to continue pilfering the system, and almost like a host just moves from one opportunistic culture society at a time. And I got a lot of great feedback from that. I mean, people were really like, whoa, we haven't heard of it like this. There's the the Rothschilds are in charge of it. The directed, I think, conspiratorial distractions, if you will, than understanding the matrix of this conspiracy at its true intent. So let me just read this to everybody. A pathocracy's a system of government where individuals with personality disorders, particularly those in cluster B, narcissistic, antisocial, borderline, histrionic, gain decisive influence over total control. Their disordered perception of reality becomes the operating system for the nation. This is our present condition. Could you just describe the pathocracy and how the financialists have utilized this, and they're gaining control of the battlefield of the young male mind right now?
Yeah. Government doesn't work without vast amounts of capital and power relationships behind it. Government doesn't create those. Government only consumes. Right? Doesn't create those. It can provide some protections and security for it, but it has to feed on artificial realities, artificial systems, artificial structures, et cetera, because that's what it is. It's artificial. The financialists put government out there, the big bankers. This isn't all bankers. It's not all banks are bad. Not all financial institutions are bad. It's, like in all things, there are factions, and there are some that are absolutely horrendous. Give me a second. When a system is financialized, where everything is, in a sense, tokenized in some form of a contract, and that is done without the willingness or the participation of the citizens and the populace of that land, you have to make sure that you have government at every scale that's going to support and defend that as it exercises the courts, the law enforcement, the contracting, enforcement, resource allocation, tax base, all this complex stuff, right? So you have to ensure that the individuals who rise up into major decision-making points and policy writing places all fall within cluster A, B, or C personality disorders. Because if they don't, they're, because those peoples live in an artificial reality where either they're all for the steal and the malevolence, or they believe that the world is out to get them, and so government needs to do what it needs to do. They're already in that space. Whereas if you have non-borderline personality disorder people, they're going to look at the government process or that judge's ruling or that district attorney's action or that politician's bill, and they're going to go, yeah, we're not going to support this. This isn't right. This is against the people. This is unconstitutional, right? And we're a nested constitutional peoples at the federal level and the states. States also have their constitution. And then depending on some of the counties, they may have further, right? Mm-hmm. So point is that liberal democracy from its inception by the Venetians, which were the old Roman Praetorians, liberal democracy from its inception is a system of borderline personality disorders. It was designed specifically for these people, for these types to pull cluster A, B, or C personality disorder types into the regime, into government, which is, the shield on one side and the tool on the other side, to pull them in such that the financialists can unrestricted enslave and steal everything, enslave everyone and steal everything, all with the plausible deniability. It's not us. Look at the government. Look at that. Look what they're doing. Right?
Right. So
the whole thing from liberal democracy from its inception is literally a system of how do you attract in and incentivize and enrich and empower personality disorder peoples.
Can you go through?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Can you go through those different clusters, A, B, and C, a little bit?
Yeah. Give me a second. Let me draw it up here because my recall memory isn't what it used to be after a couple knocks on the skull and age, I think.
One or two rocket ranges will have that effect.
Yeah, I've been banged about a bit. Yeah. Okay, so you got cluster A, B, and C. Cluster B is the dominant one. That's the one we see quite heavily in government, right? And cluster B is narcissistic personality disorder, found in most CEOs, media figures, politicians who exhibit boundless grandiosity, craving admiration, and complete lack of empathy. They see the citizenry as an audience for performance, for their performance, as sources of a narcissistic supply. Their policies aren't designed for public good, but for personal aggrandizement and the permanent memorialization of their ego. And boy, that's
what I love. That line right there just waylaid me.
Right.
I mean, that is the permanent memorialization of their ego.
Of their
right?
ego.
Yeah. And it's that idea that somehow their actions are going to be relevant for infinite terms, right?
Yes. Yes.
That they're leaving their mark on history.
Yeah. It's why the politicians work so hard at doing these big grandiose bills. Because maybe it might be named after them.
Yeah.
Right? Or some law.
Right.
Okay. It's also why so many major corporations fail is because you don't have a founder CEO anymore and you get one of these self-aggrandizing people in there and they run the company, to feed their own ego, and that runs the company in the ground because turns out you can't run a company off ego.
Cracker Barrel, Bud Light, Target. I mean, the list is just, it's so strikingly like in your face. Like it's not like, well, maybe, but it seems like that's completely gone now. Like it's so flagrant, these disorders, right? Yeah.
So, and I would, sadly say this about our own community. I went in the Army in the mid-'80s, got out in the early 90s. I went back in late 2000s to go into Special Forces, or tried to, and then fortunately I was able to do so. And the difference in leadership was so striking. We had a lot of these types as, pretty much every flag officer I met. And sadly, which really shocked me as an enlisted guy, a lot of the senior enlisted guys from E9, mostly the E9s and quote unquote E10s, right? And actually even some of the E7s, et cetera. In my day, when I first came in, it was first a sergeant back in the day, decades ago. If one of your guys got in trouble and you hadn't tried everything, all the programs and all the counseling and everything else, you got in trouble too. That's right. That's not what was happening when I came back in 2000s. The senior enlisted were just burning guys. Constantly. And the officers were even worse, right? That's right. And I won't call somebody out, but I had one. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, I just remember after I had gotten out and I was at Blackwater, I remember right after kind of the transition from George Bush, to Barack Obama, right? There was a purge of junior officers with substantial combat experience within the Special Operations Group. Like it was something like 500 plus junior officers. Yeah. And they got rid of them. They early retired them all. And I was just like, well, that seems kind of dumb. We're right in the middle of this thing, the GWAT, and why would you purge all these people? Yeah, I watched it in Green Berets. I watched captains getting passed over, being told they were going to get passed over. I watched majors get passed over, and there was all the solid guys. Yep. And it didn't matter what command was trying to do, because in some, many cases, command was actually pretty good, but they were getting passed over at the colonel level, lieutenant colonel level, et cetera. So, okay. So also under cluster B is antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy, pervasive in finance, corporate leadership, and the upper echelons of the administrative state, right? Including the military and law enforcement. Oh gosh, I have friends that have been, lifetime law enforcement guys, and it's like become it's just impossible to even be an officer anymore, police officer, right? These individuals display a profound disregard for the rights of others, which is also a really bad thing in law enforcement. Deceitfulness, impulsivity, and a stunning lack of remorse. They can sanction policies that lead to widespread poverty, violence, and death because they feel nothing for their victims. They're the hitmen of the financialist class. I love that statement too, right? Because the financialists are never going to do their own dirty work. No. Right? And some of these other parts of the personality disorders, right? You need to have somebody that can act without that remorse. And it's these sociopathic tendencies that they recruit directly for. Well, it's again back to our old units. It's not like we don't recruit for it too. A certain percentage, right? Dude, I was on. I forget. I was talking with somebody recently, and they asked me about that. Do they recruit? I'm like, of course they do. That's what they're looking for. Yeah, 100%. But not overall, right? There's a certain balance. Right. So I want to be careful. The tendencies, the tendencies. A tendency and a certain percentage of. Well, let's see if that guy's got it. Let's see if he's sane enough that he can get through, and then we got some other work for him somewhere else usually, right? Yeah, right. Okay, and then the final one under cluster B is borderline histrionic personality disorder. This is rampant in media, HR departments, which the military has just become one giant frickin' HR department. DEI offices and lower level government roles. They rule by emotion, drama, and perpetual victimhood. Their decision-making is intensely unstable and unpredictable, driven by a fear of abandonment and a need for attention. They create crisis to feel needed and enforce ideological conformity through emotional terrorism. Right. What I always find interesting about this description of borderline personality disorder is the commonality of that concept of abandonment. Yes. And how that does it, right? And it's the social rejection, right? And so what do? They bulldoze through the normalities of behavior, right? The reciprocal nature of, oh, hey, I'll help you, you help me, we'll help each other, common mission. They're just like, no, this is about me. It's about me. It's about me, right? I disagree with that a little bit. Just the last part, okay? Yeah. These are people who don't have innate talent. They have no way to know their status in a hierarchy except for in the hierarchy, in the language and, by being super knowledgeable about the nuances of some regulation or policy, et cetera, and then their interpretation from experience of it. But these are people that don't contribute anything. So innately, they don't know how they belong.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the abandonment. And we've seen people like this, in the military, even in special operations. Rare, not as often as special operations, but sometimes. It's because they don't have an innate sense of belonging because they don't naturally contribute anything. And so they're constantly, and so what they're afraid of, go back just a couple hundred years in some places, right? 300-400 years. What they're worried about is if there's a attack or there's scarcity, they're going to be the ones kicked out of the, out of the palisade, and they're going to starve to death, or they're going to get killed by the raiders. And this is really what's, at the deep underlying what's going on. So what do? They become hyper knowledgeable about systems and structure and then they do somewhat to what you're saying, function in ways to where they make sure they're indispensable. Right.
That's what I typically affiliate it to. It's that indispensable nature. It's that, the congressional, that
appropriations.
And they know that policy inside and out. Right. Yeah. And it's just some antiquated, regurgitated policy
it's all made up.
That's right.
It's all made up.
Right. That's right. That's
right. That knowledge is going to save you when the barbarians are actually inside the gate. It's like, I'm still going to abandon your ass. Anyways. So that's it for cluster B, right? Cluster C is the anxious bureaucrats, right? The dependent and avoidant personalities, and particularly it's the avoidant personalities, right? Fill the sprawling bureaucracies. They're obedient clerks of the pathocracy, too fearful to question authority or deviate from the script. They follow orders not out of malice, but out of a pathological need for security and a terror of conflict. Again, just like above, they are worried about when their times are hard, they're not going to be in the in group. They ensure the machine functions smoothly, processing the paperwork for the destruction of their own societies without a second thought. Right? Again, these are people that don't naturally, these are the lower level people that don't contribute anything other than, their cog in the machine. I don't remember if you ever see the movie Brazil.
Oh, yeah. Love that movie.
This is these people.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Yes.
And, it's also in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but I think he did a really, really good demonstration of these types in Brazil, right?
And that was Terry Gilliam, right?
Terry Gilliam, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, God, I love him. What a brilliant guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, then finally, it's cluster A. It's the ideological fanatics, the paranoid and schizoid personalities. This gets back to the ideologies comment earlier, right? Often drive the most extreme ideological movements. Their detachment for reality and pervasive distrust makes them perfect revolutionaries. They see existential threats everywhere and demand total ideological purity, fueling the endless moral panics and witch hunts that characterize modern institutions. This is, there's a trans genocide going on. How the hell can we genocide a people that don't exist? Right?
And then the same could be true now, like you were saying in the beginning, that, now they're going to radicalize the fanatics through their own pathology on the other side, through this idea of Christian or white burn purity.
That out,
right? Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that we do have to burn it out.
This is what I wanted to get to. This is what, because this is what I think the core context of most of your writing has been not so delicately presenting as the probable outcome, right? And that's the thing. It's like, okay, this is, all by design for sure, to protect the next movement, the next evolution, iteration of whatever the next financialist framework is going to look like, the kill chain is going to look like. So the inevitability is there, right? And you really did a great job in describing this in the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Can you talk about that a little bit and why it's so easily, in your mind, it's so easily depicted with what's taking place right now?
Yeah. So this gets back, I just published a book called This, Our English Civilization.
I saw that. Everybody go to Amazon and buy that today, please.
Yeah. It's a collection of essays. Most of the books I'm publishing now are collections of essays that, I'm not smart enough to think ahead. I've got to write things as they come to me. Also, things are happening so rapidly now, and there's so much uncertainty. It's like anybody who's projecting ahead what's going to happen in the future, even 3 years out, is wrong.
That's right.
They might randomly be right about something, but anyway, so in English civilization, going back to the real hard roots of it in the 800s, really started in the 700s under Egbert, Alfred the Great's grandfather. And even before that, who was one of the greatest, rulers in the English peoples, right? What would become the English peoples? Boudica.
Boudica. Oh, wow.
Boudica, right? Yeah. And what does she do? She went to war with Rome because they raped her daughters. And I think her too, right? Mm-hmm. Killed her husband and her husband died, and then they were trying to steal the land, doing the financial skills chain stuff, because that's still who the same people are that we're dealing with, right? Romans, right? The Roman system. And so she went to war. So point being is that, and that was 400 years or 500 years before the English civilization was coded in the common law. Point being is this. In Germanic, in the peoples from Northern and Northwestern Europe, because our growing seasons are so short and because our winters are so harsh, we tend to have less children, which makes we still had high death rates from mothers at childbirth, et cetera. So in our Northern and Northwestern European cultures, our women have more value than in other places of the world, even in Southern and Central Europe. Wow. And over time, just because of statistics, because of the amount of warfare, conflict, harshness, et cetera, virtually all of our power and assets passes down the matrilineal lines. Mother to daughter to daughter to daughter, because the patrilineal father to son lines die out after, or get killed or an avalanche or, just because of the nature of the environment in which we grew up, the harsher, and our ancestors come from. So our women have naturally had a higher role and status in our societies. Mm-hmm. As a part of that, but not specifically, we've also been a people that have been a rule of law people, particularly the Scandinavians, because when you live in harsh environments, even the slightest infraction by some resentful or selfish, or crazy individual can kill the whole tribe that winter, or could get them betrayed on some, in some fight with some other enemy. And so you have to have, and at the same time, you can't just go and start killing people because you don't like them or they're crazy, et cetera, because that causes this destability in the tribe itself. In the tribe. Yeah. And so we've, and again, because of the shortness of our growing season, the harshness of our winters, the limitation, we've got to prepare for 8 months, for 4 months of basically being locked down historically. Right. Mm-hmm. And I actually lived about 7,500 feet up in the Canadian border when I was a kid for about 8 years. Wow. I lived that way. And I'm going to tell you, I kind of miss it, honestly.
My wife is from Maine, and she laughs at me when we go up and in the winters to see her family, and she jokes at my Florida blood and how weak I am. And, she I remember when we first met, I tried to make my claim that, going to school at Penn State was in the tundra. And she says, nothing's colder than Maine. And I was like, no way. And she proved it to me. So I was like, no wonder why you're harder than I am. So
it's the same with the, what is the only U.S. military base that issues Arctic gear? It's Fort Drum.
That's right.
Because of so point being is that we're a rule of law people, and that's so that if we do have to do something harsh, like kill somebody or ostracize somebody, that we do it in accordance with a set of laws and principles that the community adheres to. As well, our women, again, because often the men were off fighting somewhere or off, gathering resources, etc., even the non-warrior ones, our women have had a much higher status in our societies. The problem is that when, starting in the 12, 13, 14, 1500s, really in the 15, 1600s, where, everything started to become easier and we could move resources around with ships and we were able to get resources from other parts of the world, the absolute need for us to adhere to these strict systems and structures and the male-female balance of power, et cetera, all of that started to slip and go away because the underlying reasons why that were environmental reasons were gone.
Right.
Well, what that did is it allowed for, and where did all this coalesce and really centralize? In the British Isles, right? In the English society civilization, because half of the English culture is Dane. It's the Dane law, right? And same with Scots and et cetera, not to take away from the native peoples, but we're a mixing of peoples who goes back thousands of years.
Right.
So point is that what it did is it makes us, the English-speaking peoples specifically, common law peoples specifically, susceptible to these personality disorder types infiltrating our systems and structures and organizations. Why? Because historically, when there was resource shortages and there was this, losing a lot of our women in childbirth, and we're losing a lot of our kids when they were young, we were pretty harsh about these people. Like Blood Eagle kind of harsh sometimes, right? And personally, I think we need to bring the Blood Eagle back. That would solve a lot of problems.
Can you explain that to people who are listening?
Blood Eagle?
Yeah.
Blood Eagle is what, for the ultimate offense in Scandinavian society culture, you flay the back, open it up like wings. You lock their arms out. You flay their skin off their back. You crack through the ribs with a hatchet, right, of the axe, and then you pull their lungs out and put them on top of their shoulders, and you let them die. Right? You don't let them die while that's going on. You let them die once they're all wide open. That's a Blood Eagle. There's actually a pretty good depiction of it on the show Vikings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And that was a common punishment throughout the Scandinavian peoples,
correct.
Right? It wasn't just centralized in one area.
And also the British Isles, wherever there were Scandinavian peoples, right? And some of the Germanic, because Northwest Germans we're all similar ethnic peoples, right? Where the Scandinavian, Germanic, Britannic, what would become the Britannic peoples, et cetera, which is a mix of peoples. So, but the Blood Eagle was for the ultimate offense, right?
That's right.
But boy, it left a message, right? Way more than heads on pikes.
You see someone in that capacity, and and that it goes back to like right now. I mean, I had multiple people who viewed Charlie's just shattering traumatic death, who had never seen death, right? And they'd never watched the videos. They had never seen it. None of the endless videos coming out of Ukraine for the last several years, or October 7th, or any of these horrific realities that you can find, all over your feed now. They hadn't seen it, and now it's prominent, and that high caliber round penetrating through his neck, and just the massive exsanguination that took place. It's people are like, it almost looks fake. Yeah, and in that statement alone, I think is relative to what you're talking about, right? We have lost the recognition of these are the outcomes when society devolves, right? Yes. The outcome will end up being the Blood Eagle as a retribution for destroying the agreement, the laws of the land that keep order.
Correct. So so absolutely right. And why'd they have to kill Charlie Kirk? Because they wanted to go too far. Right? They want us to go too far, because in that we die in the millions like the Ukrainians are.
That's right.
Either in a war or in a foreign war, which is what they need, because they need the young men off the land so they can confiscate the land. The great taking, right? There's all kinds of people talking about this. And the last thing that they really need to steal, which is why the Stablecoin Act and all these other things are all cleverly done, and letting private equity into 401k plans and tokenization of all of this, that is an attempt to steal the boomers' wealth. Mm-hmm. The largest collection of wealth ever accumulated. Well, who would actually fight them if they tried to do that? The young men who should be inheriting that wealth. And young men too, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, in my daily, job, I travel all across the country. I'm engaging with these financial advisors, and there are two fascinating components of this that I often bring up in kind of sidebar conversations. Is you have the average age of a financial advisor is like 61, 62 right now. Yeah. And they are escaping this profession in droves. I mean, I think they see the writing on the wall, and so in the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be half as many advisors advising the younger generations on how to protect their wealth. Yeah. And then you also have the greatest transference of wealth amongst generations in the history of all peoples, to the tune of about $36 trillion in wealth transfer, primarily in the United States, that's going to take place. And there will be nobody available to guide them to maintain and keep their wealth in a specific spot, right? Yes. And how are they doing that? They're driving these people out of the industry by hyper-regulation, by making it more difficult to log and track trades, all the things. Like you can see it taking place in real time, and it's just...
So this is why the assassination now. This is why the move to radicalize the young men now. Because the final theft of the boomer wealth is going to, it's happening already, but it's not going to finalize for another 7, 8 years. And you need 3 or 4 years to get young men radicalized enough that they'll go die in the millions fighting some, bullshit made up enemy. Right? Now they're going to fight a real enemy first. They have to, right? Mm-hmm. You can false flag them into that fight, but the fight is real and the enemy they're fighting is real. But you're setting that up to get them all, God, king, and country, glory, honor, duty, so that then they'll go fight some other big enemy that you tell them they need to, but they're just going to die in the millions in that fight for nothing.
That's right.
And then that locks in the steal. It's why it's all happening now, right? Yeah. So back to the, just to finish with the pathocracy, we owe steadily over the last 400 years have had such luxury and comfort increasingly that we've forgotten that when this kind of person pops up, we should either kick the living shit out of them or should just kill them.
Right.
Right? Shun and shame and all that first. But if that doesn't work, then you kick the shit out of them. We were still doing it when we were young. And some of those people, when they realize, I watch it with my kid, right? I watch it with kids. Kids will try behaviors. And unless they're checked, they'll go, okay, that one works. And it works in these circumstances with this type of person. I'm going to keep doing that. Well, the problem that we've had is that we've been so comfortable. We've not had to worry about our winters as bad. We've not lost as many, steadily all of that reasons for why we were so, we were so observant and careful to make sure these types of personality disorder behaviors did not become the norm amongst us. That impetus for that has steadily been declining over the last 400 years until now. They're riddled throughout everything. And the financialist, the old Venetian bankers become Dutch bankers, become City of London bankers, become some of Wall Street bankers, et cetera. And now they're firmly over in UAE and Qatar. They know this. They have been steadily feeding us comforts, right, while stealing everything. But they've been steadily feeding us comforts and making sure that the old, difficulties that made us be more aware of other people around us and more careful to excise these kinds of behaviors. They've been making sure that all the impetus, the drive, the motivation for that's been removed from us. Why? So they can embed these people, so they can build out these extractive systems, these financialist kill chain systems. And they started in Europe back in the 700s. It ultimately led to the 1054 schism, where the Catholic Church was created out of Orthodox Christianity, And it's just been going since there. And now they're at the stage where the largest wealth transfer in human history, which will probably never happen again, they want to steal it. They are all bent on it. And again, like the great taking, there's so many people talking about it, right? And articulating it. Well, the one thing that prevents it, is young men who stand on the lands and say Malone Labe and understand what that means, right?
Really understand.
It wasn't about the weapons. Yes, you had to take the weapons from the dead hands, but what they were saying is, come take our lands. Try it.
That's right.
Come take the assets. Try it. Right? That's what that really is. And I've written about this, several articles as well on this. So they have to, to do this, the big theft, this trillions, tens of trillions of dollars of real wealth, not just derivative wealth, but actual underlying fundamental assets, they have to wipe out the young men. And the only way to defeat them is to have the young men and have the young men remoralized, have the young men connected to the land and the soil and the people, et cetera. And that means that uber wealthy and elite need to, something you said earlier, need to do a better job of reconnecting with the young men of their communities and getting involved. And somebody posted something earlier today about there's a whole lot of boomer land and wealth out here that's not being, the best thing to do would be to put young men to work on it.
Yes.
In various forms. Young men that would then have an ability to earn status and place and a sense of honor, right? We don't need everybody all war fighters. No. It only takes 2 to 3%, of war fighters to take care of all of it. We need people who are young men who are tied to land, who will fight if necessary, but we need young men that their soul is connected to that land, their family's connected to that land, and the productivity of that land.
It's fascinating. We did a show with this group called the Beef Initiative, and they talked about how many family farms are being eradicated at such an alarming rate. And I just saw another story about California, and there's a large contingency of California fifth generation, sixth generation farmers that have lost the fight and the resources, and they're having to sell their land here in the next few months. And I think that goes straight to the heart of what you're talking about. And then you also look at the sheer magnitude of farmland that Bill Gates owns, the sheer magnitude of farmland that the Chinese have purchased.
Ted Turner.
Ted Turner. I mean, so you see, I mean, at least I think we see it. So the idea is for you, the listener, to begin to see this for what it is. And it's the manipulation, right? The pathological. And that's before we got on, you referenced, hey, one of the things that we need to stop getting caught up in is the context of ideology being the focal point. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why it's so critical to distinguish between pathology and ideology?
Yeah, so great bringing it back to this. Ideologies are theater. They're disposable system. Anybody who goes into one of these ideologies and is espousing they're disposable. They're just disposable body bags, basically. They'll do violence and do, as we need to tune up this type of pathology that goes into that ideology, we'll tune up that pathology. Magically, that ideology is dominant right now. If we need to tune up this other one, we'll do that. The issue, and again, these ideologies don't create the pathology. The pathology is attracted to that kind of ideology because that ideology was created by that type of pathology. Right? And so if we keep looking at Marxist and National Socialist and white supremacist and black, whatever lives matter, all they are insane people. They attract the insane. Now they're insane in similar ways. So they go to certain, set of words and, canon and magics that they can go to where they feel like they belong. But it's the underlying insanity first. And we need to get down. It's like the book I wrote, The Eternal War. There's first principle stuff that we need to get back to because the pathocracy uses these masks of these ideologies and threats, et cetera. So you keep chasing that and you're not removing them, and you're not restoring sanity to your systems, right? To the halls of power. And so they'll let you go. You can chase the ideology all you want. You'll change nothing. And oh, by the way, to the purity thing right now, where they're already hard flipping from the Marxists to the National Socialists. That's what's happening. You see all the signs and social media, et cetera, right? It's exactly what you do. They feed one ideology for a while, that pathology, and then when they're ready to flip to the other, or flip to another one, what do? Well, they burn that one. What changed? Nothing. Because we didn't realize that that's a personality disorder type and not Marxism. It's not National Socialism. It's not white supremacy. It's a neurological personality type, right? Disorder type.
Right.
And then once you realize that, now you can look at government and go, that sheriff is a cluster B. That district attorney, that politician, that business leader, that, right? And now you can start dealing with and going, okay, how do we deal with that? Right? We used to shame and shun and kill. How do we deal with it? They're everywhere now. This pathocracy is in everything, particularly in the English-speaking world.
So what do we do? You had this great, the reclamation of our communities, countries, states, and nations requires the deliberate and systematic pathologization of our institution. Can you explain what that means specifically?
Yeah, so we can see, so first off, all power is local. Federal power is an accumulation of local power. You can do everything right at the federal level and change nothing, right? So what you have to do is in your small and local area. So first off, you need to understand these pathologies and the neural types, and you can do the studies. You don't have to be an expert on it. Maybe know an expert who knows these things. One of the things you got to be careful of is a lot of the experts also have these pathologies. And they go into those professions, like the people who write the DSM, the DSM
Bibles,
books, they're psychopaths. And they make sure that they downplay the degree and amount of psychopathy. So if I was a psychopath or a sociopath or a narcissist, cluster A, B, or C, and I had an inclination towards academia, I might go into a profession where I'm doing studies that demonstrate this very, disorder that I have and downplays it.
It's so funny that not funny, but it's so poignant that you bring this up. As before you caught on, Jordy and I were having this conversation where I was trying to describe just that, where you look at the history, right? When it started off, if you go as far back, right? It's the metaphysics of our rituals, right? Right. Yeah. It's the spring and the fall, the winter, the female, the male, right? All of those which emerged into those types of tribalistic explanations for existence, and then and then those morphed into something a little bit more tangible or manipulative from a theological perspective. Then you had Greek philosophy emerge, and then Roman philosophy, and the Age of Enlightenment, and then from that you had modern psychiatric theory emerge, and it's all just the same thing. It's people, it's trying to minimize or soften the reality of this evil that's present, right? Yes. And the gross manipulation for those who truly understand how easily how easily it is to manipulate those lower order male figures, right? Yeah. And we just continue to redefine it, as you said, in these ideologies to distract, to say, hey, this is what's really taking place.
Here's an enemy for you to go fight.
Yes, yeah.
Go fight that enemy, right?
Yeah.
And they wait. So very good. You asked the question about what do we do with it? We need to understand what these pathologies are. They're very well known. They're very studied. They're way more prevalent than, again, the academics allow, right? Also, there's another piece in there people need to realize. I don't know many academics, and I did PhD studies in a pretty hard field. I didn't finish. I haven't done my dissertation, so I'm not a PhD. In case somebody wants to try and throw that at me at some point. Which is
they're going to throw a lot more than that at you, EM, once you go over the tipping point, brother.
Yeah. So what we need to realize is that most of academia until the last 50 years has been male, and most of them were lower status males trying to get laid. So how the hell can I trust most of the freaking analysis about male, female differences? No, most of the shit they've been writing was to get laid by unhealthy women.
Oh my God, that's perfection.
It's the truth, right? So, right? So, yeah, let's listen to the experts. That motherfucker was trying to, forget my language, Jeremy, sorry, but that guy was trying to get laid, and he lied about a whole lot of shit. And I don't care if he's got, 3,000 citations for that paper and, et cetera, et cetera.
Trust the experts.
Trust the experts. I'm not trusting the expert if he's a beta male. Anyway.
That's right.
Which is actually, no, I won't go down that pathway. Alpha beta relationships are actually not what people have been said, because the betas in animal species do the fighting, they do the raising of the young, they do the foraging, they do the hunting, et cetera. The alpha only fights other alphas and then maintains the balance internal. So I want to be,
that's a good classification. Thank you for
so betas,
putting that
we need
forward.
to be careful, because we have betas in our societies and cultures, and they're very necessary and they're very good. And we need to be, right? What we're talking about when we say betas, and this was all done on purpose by these academics trying to get laid, right?
That's right.
Okay. But in what we're talking about when we say betas, right? When we hear it, are actually thetas and omegas and, et cetera, right? Okay. Back to so we need to understand these pathologies. We need to understand how they work. We need to understand how to pick up the cues. And there's great videos on YouTube on each one of these. Goes into detail. Great videos, actually very well done. Usually they're fairly short. And it talks about a parent that's, a mother that's a narcissist or this, and there's a lot of great work. Do that. Then look at your local leadership and identify who's what and who's where. Now, be careful not to do confirmation bias and project something upon, et cetera. But I'm going to tell you right now, there is virtually nobody in any position of government at any level that isn't in one of the clusters.
Right.
Period. And then start looking at, using the structure in the system, voting, council meetings, et cetera. How do we get people removed? Doing the process the right way. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, right? Mm-hmm. It takes community getting together, but it's doable with short of violence. And then barring that, what winds up happening historically, and this is what they're trying to push for, right? If people don't do that, then it goes to blood. And we don't know if we, the healthy, sane people, get wiped out and the clusters win and dominate everything, which is what happened with World War II and World War I.
Right.
And somewhat the GWAT, although a lot of us survived and we've found ways to recover from the brain injuries. And, the guys that have PTSD have been finding ways to recover. And that's amazing. Your community, the SEAL communities, actually kind of took the lead on that 15 years ago. And I've got to give you guys, I don't like to give you guys a lot of respect for much of anything, but I got to give you that one, right?
I will say we definitely took the construct of operator syndrome and have been promoting that reality that in a much
and God bless you guys for it, right? And the Green Berets are just now catching up, right? So I mean, genuinely,
what's interesting,
genuine respect. Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is our community as those people who are running our community have been very adamantly opposed to allowing the idea into the community on an operational level, and it's actually the different SF groups that have begun to allow Dr. Free and a lot of other people into their communities to begin to talk about it at the command level, which is
that's because we watched the destruction to the SEAL platoons because it didn't happen.
That's right.
Right. So, but the guys that were outside the platoons, the guys that started, one was a Green Beret, Andrew Moore, but the guys that really started me in one SEAL in particular, Bob Aguilar or Bob Aguelo, right?
Yeah.
Bob told me, because I was very suicidal, and Bob said I was too. He said, but as the recovery goes, that signal will just go away, and then one day you'll realize that you don't hear it anymore.
That's right.
That saved my life. So
for sure,
the first guys, when I started back in 2019, diagnosis and then treatments, and then working through identity redevelopment, they were all SEALs. A couple CAD guys, couple DevGru guys, and then a Green Beret colonel and a couple, but most of the guys were SEALs. And you're absolutely right. They were all having to do it privately. They were having to do it outside. Right. They were, so yeah. So again, we, the sane of communities, need to do a better job of recognizing the insane, and not just the ones on the streets, et cetera, but these personality ones, these clusters, and then identify who in different positions of power. Start with the positions of power, like judges, district attorneys, sheriffs, police chiefs, governors, mayors. It's, people that have enforcement capabilities and powers.
Right.
Start there. Really look at judges, because people need to understand the most powerful group of people in the English civilizational system are judges.
By far.
By far.
By far. Growing up as my dad was an attorney, and he'd been preaching that to me since I was a little boy. Yeah. Like, the people that control our society are the judges, because they're the purveyors of the law. They're the ones administering, the consequence of whatever actions they are.
Yeah. So that's where it starts. And if we fail in that, terribly sorry, one little final piece.
Yeah,
if we fail in that, then it goes to blood. And it's probably going to be a mix of both. And even if it goes to blood, we still need to do this. Don't focus on the ideologies. Yes, we got to do defense there, but the honest truth is that's not too hard, right? We can deal with that, right? The place where what we need to realize is that all the ideologies are being fueled. This whole trans thing, like this gun and engravings on the bullets, that's the passport from 9/11.
Yeah.
It's the bloody equivalent of the passport of 9/11.
That's right.
You've got to be joking me. But why they do that is they get us into disgust, impurity, and rage, so that we're not looking at them. We're not looking at the system.
Right.
We're not figuring out. And they will act like they're backing us and supporting us. The judges will do the right thing in the district. No, they're not. They're just burning their low-level disposables so that we don't look at them. So even when, and it is when, and it's already started, but when this goes to blood, we have got to root out these personality, this pathocracy, or we lose everything. We can win. It's like we've won every gun battle since World War II and lost every war.
Right.
Why? This.
Same thing. The same thing. That's right. Yeah. Is there a component, like we always, I think as I watch, closely your posts, I watch Clay's posts, I watch, Dale Stark's posts, I watch, the GWAT guys that I really believe have a comprehensive understanding of this, right? And they're looking at it in these types of layers, this type of societal or civilization, these underpinnings that have taken place, because they've educated themselves as a recognition of the tool that they became themselves as a result of 9/11, right? We've moved to this point where we all seem to recognize that our influence on those younger males right now is pivotal. Yes. So what advice could you give those of us that are out there doing it, or even firefighters, police officers, even just local carpenters or welders or just good men out there? What is the messaging that we should be focused on to try and influence these young men before they're, before they become victims of the pathocracy?
Yeah, so the great question, and again, this gets back to why Charlie Kirk was assassinated yesterday, right? There's a saying in our world, right? You need to be a monster, but you have to have that monster under control at every minute. Except those minutes when you get to let the monster go. Right? I said this at the bottom of the article this morning, right? I touched on it last night, but I said at the bottom of the article about Charlie Kirk this morning, and that is that we have to do what we have to do to root out this pathocracy. We have to do what we have to do to defend ourselves and our lands and prevent this theft of the boomers' wealth. That's our wealth. That is generational wealth that belongs to us already. Doesn't need to be titled paper. No, that's our parents and our grandparents. That wealth belongs to us and our people in these lands. So we need to prevent that. So we're going to have to do what they force us to do, but we need to be moderate in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our actions. We cannot allow them to drive us to hate and disgust, because then they're in control. Okay. I want to give a more, that's a message that we need to have with the young men in a conversation and our own community, because we've got our own hotheads, and especially guys with, brain injuries and, still dealing with inhibitory neuron issues and impulse control, et cetera. Right. And some guys just like, they see it, they're tired, they want to do it. Right. Let's get it over with.
Right.
Okay. There's a more sophisticated thing that I think really needs to happen, especially with people like you and Sean and others that have the higher level societal connections and relationships. Our generation of GWAT guys are the equivalent of Patton and Eisenhower and those guys in World War II, because that's what's happening now. What's happening is we are now going into phase 2 of this collapse, which is our equivalent to World War II. The GWAT is the equivalent of World War I. Now we're moving into, the equivalent of World War II. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's the younger guys that are going to fight. And it's the wealthy elite that need these young men to stand and hold and fight, because they own the assets. There's no connection or relationship between them now, quite despite many of these family offices are genuinely trying to find people to fill jobs, to even run companies and asset, and they just can't find the quality guys. Well, GWAT guys need to be doing a better job of getting to know the young men in their communities. And I've got a friend, a longtime Navy diver who was with you guys, with the teams his whole time, and then he went and did other special project stuff, right? Usually those guys and the riverine guys do, right?
That's right. They are the ones who keep going.
Right. Yeah. So, he's doing it out in Utah, and he's doing an extraordinary job, and he's just, filtering through these guys and getting to know them and understand them. And we need to be doing that with the young men and figuring out, mentoring, shaping, guiding, but we also need to be doing selecting. And then we need to connect them, with the high net worth people who have jobs for them, companies and businesses and opportunities for them. And because the high net worth folks are ready to let the whole thing burn down, because they can't, and they're ready to let our lands be flooded with millions, tens of millions of people who shouldn't be here, because they're trying to find people who will work.
That's right.
Good quality people. Well, we got a lot of them here. It's just, what's the filtering process? Right? Because school is so corrupted, and all of the normal mechanisms we've used have been so corrupted in the last 20 years with all this dye and everything else, right? Mm-hmm. So a more complex but absolutely essential is guys like us need to be doing what we do best when we go into a country and we're working with host nation. And that's how we have to think. We need to be training, working with, and identifying who's good, who's solid, who needs a little guidance, who needs to get slapped a little bit, verbally or otherwise. Right. And then we need to be introducing them to the, elites here, the asset owners in our country, and getting them linked together and going, hey, you got this business, you've been trying to hire somebody. I got this kid over here. Right. And reconnect 100%. That loyalty, that multi-family, multi-generational dependency that is a land and a people.
Interesting.
And a lot of you guys, like you and really Sean and some of the others, you guys do have the communications with these family offices. You do have, with the high net worth people. And we do know that, the guys like Clay and others, and my friend Sam out in Utah, Sam Burgett's actually his name, you guys, these guys are doing this just two connected efforts, and we got to connect those two efforts together, or we lose everything.
it's fascinating. I go out and I go to these teams that are emerging, and the RIA space is exploding, the independent space. Everybody's bailing out of the wirehouses because they see the manipulation, the control that the main wirehouses are, that the advisor is just the commodity, like the client is now too. It's an abomination. So this massive movement towards independence in this area is taking place. But what I continue to see, and I see a lot of, like in our firm, we are perpetually recruiting, former Division I athletes. I think, we've, since I've come on board 4 years ago, I've got multiple Green Berets that are on the group. We just partnered with a firm out, an international emerging markets organization that one of their principals is a former team guy, and so it's these athletes and team guys that, or operators or military personnel that our organization has seen. And I think it's indicative of that sales mindset, right? The go-getting, the alpha drive, the workaholic guy that's going to sacrifice family to, do the 35 meetings a week, if you will, or whatever, going out every night to entertain. But what I don't see is the advisor groups hiring those guys to have them come in and take over their books. Or connect them to their clients, right?
Because they're intimidated.
That's right.
They're intimidated.
That's right. And it's just like, man, it's almost as if there's like that, because one thing I also see when before I was pretty much solely involved in this industry, when I would go work for major corporations and come in and do the presentations or work with her, I would be like, all right, how are you recruiting? Who are you recruiting for? What's and it was the pathocracy they were looking for.
Yes.
They had tagged or labeled or however you want to in their interview process that if you were former military or former law enforcement or former Division I athlete or athlete, that you would be problematic for the integration. Yeah, that's right. And they basically extracized you from the potential of joining the firm, and that was all by intention. Yes. And so I think now part of that the development and mentoring these young men into the belief that they can fulfill those components. I almost want to say, to almost take the Mike Rowe methodology to say, hey, like you had commented, go work the land. Yes. Right? Figure out how to work the land, whatever that looks like, to be a plumber, an electrician, to be a builder, to be, whatever that looks like, to become invaluable for the maintenance of what the underlying foundation of society is, right? Yes. That's where we have to drive these young men. Yeah, reality. That's right. The reality. Yeah. That's
reality. So I have a book coming out here probably next week. It's called Modern Knight's Guidebook.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. And it goes into all this kind of stuff in detail. I've been having conversations with some folks and all that, the young kids, I'm like, they're not even, most of them aren't concerned about college, et cetera. And I'm telling them, there's this massive transition to these companies and these businesses. Go work for one of them. Go credit, go get your, learn the trade. And we'll help you buy it. I will find somebody, somebody who will help you and lend, and they'll help you buy it. And the owner might, if you prove yourself, and somebody. These are businesses that are some of them 40 years old. They got a built-in clientele. They got all of that, right? Help you buy it. So that's a natural thing that's going to happen anyways. And kids, they understand college is BS, et cetera. Boys and girls are realizing that, right? So,
well, I've told my kids, we send them to a very nice preparatory IB school so they can learn to think And that way we've said to them, listen, if you don't want to go to college, we're fine with that.
Yeah.
We will fund your entrepreneurial aspect for 4 years to get you launched and going in order to have your own business. And here are the places, here are the people we can introduce. So we've made that very clear to our girls.
Well, there's amazing opportunities now for young men and women that just didn't exist for the last 50 years. And it's this transition, this demographic transition. But unfortunately, private equity and family offices are rushing in there, and they're not. They don't really have any intent to run it. They can't, right? I've been around since the junk bond days, and I watched what private equity did in the LBO days, right?
Right.
And we're still dealing with that. Give me 1 second. So, central theme for guys like us with the young men is we need to break this lie that has been used to destroy our young men, and we need to remind our young men they are the only actual asset. But they have to develop themselves, and they have to develop themselves with skill sets that are necessary to the tribe, to the community, to their families, etc. And they need to develop their martial capabilities. They don't necessarily need to go, in the units and things that we did, although I recommend it for anybody. Or into combat arms, or even in the military, et cetera. But, they need to be trained and prepared and ready. Maybe they're not going to be frontline troops, but if shit comes to them, they need to be able to stand and defend. And we might need to be able, this is probably going, I don't see it not, but in some places at different times, there's going to be a phone call to 30 guys. It's like, we got to go, boys. Get your shit.
Let's go.
Get your gear. We got to go do something. Right. And in many of those cases, we got to go defend something, or we got to go re-snatch and grab somebody, or we got to, we got to, et cetera, et cetera. So, what we need to remind young men is that without young men standing on a piece of land and fighting for it with guns and everything else, and intelligence and knowledge and all of that, and a relationship and networks, because lone wolves don't do nothing but make good assassins. That's about it.
That's right.
So, teaching young men, breaking this lie and this illusion that's been steadily taught for the last 400 years, that these banks are the value, that money, the portfolios are assets, and that the real value is and I hate to say this, what I was going to say is going to tick some people off, but that the real asset's the women. No, it ain't. Women can be replaced. Young men that can fight for, and it's historically accurate. Young men who stand and fight for the land and are capable of fighting, those are not replaceable. You cannot replace them with foreigners. It has never worked in history.
Yep.
Right? So, and I'm not saying young women aren't important and women aren't important. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is what we have to do is and everything we're doing is let these young men know, no, you're already an asset. You are already the asset. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. Now, what you need to do is improve the value of that asset. And here's the things that you can do. And that needs to be message after message after message after message. We got to cut through. And if we take a step back and look at all these ideologies and everything that's being done, it's actually specifically to prevent that very message. Young men, you are the value and the asset. And here's things, don't have to be wild, crazy. You don't have to go to Harvard. You don't have to go into SEALs. You don't have to do all this. You can improve your asset value every single day substantively by doing just some simple things, just by improving yourself. And here's some men in your community, right? And there's all kinds of these men trying to do things, right, to help out. Here's some men in your community you might want to go build a relationship with, because they can guide you, accelerate, connect you, all of that. Amen. And we need to connect from there. Again, we need to connect with these, asset owners that have businesses and companies and go, hey, I got a good guy for you. And I vetted him, right? Because that's the other thing, right? Men have to vet men, not HR, right? Not some DIE program, not that's some government, no school. Men vet men. Period. And you and I know that well, right? We've been through numerous vetting processes.
That's right.
Right. And then there's that saying, I don't know if you guys have in the SEALs and the Green Berets, we have a saying, every day of your life, once you come into this world, right, into this life, and you choose this path, every day of your life thereafter is you are being assessed for another selection event that you don't even know about.
That's right.
And you might get a tap on the shoulder one day and says, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go talk about this. There's some other stuff we can be doing. And it doesn't all have to be secret squirrel kind of, you know what I mean? It's just,
can be like,
an investment opportunity. There's a business opportunity, right? Yeah.
Hey, I need you to go be a part of this collective that's going to till this land into something significant.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. EM, man, I look forward to our conversations every time. I look forward to every article that you post.
Honor.
I appreciate you more than you could possibly fathom. I think you're bringing clarity to this whole situation in ways that other people just don't have the capacity or the willingness to step forth onto the breach like you are. And so I'm honored to be your acquaintance and hopefully developing a friendship. And I just, I respect the hell out of you and what you're doing. So thank you so much.
I just want to say that I'm probably borderline retarded and I don't know how much danger I'm getting into. So I'll just keep going until.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you.
All right. Take care, David.